Amber remained motionless before the partially open living room door, her gaze captivated by a glimmering object on the carpeted floor. A fragile gold bracelet, foreign and incongruous, rested abandoned on the luxurious rug. Her brow furrowed in discontent. The bracelet was not hers, nor did it belong to Michael, her husband, who had just announced that he would be away on a business trip for a few days. What troubled her even more was the realization that she had meticulously cleaned this very room earlier that day, and it had not been present then. Amber's intuition whispered that something was amiss. The house fell into a profound stillness whenever Michael departed, an overwhelming hush that enveloped her like a suffocating shroud. Yet now, the tranquility seemed to have been breached by an unseen entity, a presence, perhaps, hovering just outside her perception. "Is there anyone present?" she called out, her voice slicing through the silence, seeking to shatter the oppressive stillness. No response. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, distant and monotonous, stretched time unbearably thin. Amber knelt, her fingers gliding over the cool metal as she retrieved the bracelet. A shiver coursed through her body. In that moment, it pierced the silence. A whisper of sound. The sound did not emanate from the living room. Rather, it drifted in from the hallway behind her. Echoes of footsteps. Gentle yet purposeful, as if an individual were attempting to navigate unnoticed. Her heart raced within her ribcage, breath momentarily trapped in her throat. A presence lingered within the confines of the house. But how is one to proceed? After Michael departed, she meticulously secured every door. Amber whirled, her eyes flitting to the hallway, yet it lay vacant. A chill breeze slipped through a slightly ajar window, coaxing the curtains into a languid sway. She attempted to persuade herself that it was insignificant, that the solitude of the house was merely toying with her thoughts. Yet, from the dimly lit recess of the corridor, a voice surfaced, deep and silky, tinged with a subtle undertone of derision. "Are you in search of something, Amber?" She spun around, her heart almost ceasing at the sight of Ryan, Michael's son, lounging nonchalantly in the doorway. Clad in a black t-shirt and dark jeans, his piercing gaze fixed on hers, radiating an intensity that implied he had been observing her for quite a while. "Ryan," she breathed, her voice trembling with disbelief. "When will it be? When did you arrive?" Ryan's lips twisted into a subtle sardonic smile, rendering her unable to decipher his thoughts. "Yesterday." "Wasn't it Michael who informed you?" Amber gulped, her throat tightening. Michael had not indicated that Ryan would be returning home. The sudden arrival of her stepson, along with the enigmatic bracelet and the palpable tension in the air, left her with the sensation that she had wandered into a story beyond her comprehension. "This bracelet," she began, her voice wavering slightly as she lifted it for him to admire. "Does it belong to you?" Ryan cast a fleeting look at the bracelet, a shadow crossing his features before a soft chuckle escaped his lips. Numeral. "It seems you've uncovered something quite intriguing, haven't you?" Amber felt an urge to delve deeper, to untangle the complexities of the situation, yet the frosty, inscrutable gaze in Ryan's eyes left her at a loss for words. In that instant, she recognized an undeniable truth. This dwelling, once a refuge for her soul, now exuded an unsettling air of vulnerability. Amber clenched the bracelet tightly as she made her way back to her bedroom. Ryan had vanished up the staircase, leaving her to grapple with her breath, while her thoughts swirled in disarray. The house, adorned with immaculate white walls and shimmering crystal chandeliers, failed to mask the memories she had desperately sought to entomb. Amber had not always embodied the essence of the woman she had become. Prior to her encounter with Michael, she embodied a different essence, one marked by strength, ambition, and an unwavering independence. In the whirlwind of a fast-paced environment, filled with a relentless schedule and a cascade of crucial meetings, she once held the conviction that she could attain it all: a thriving career, a deep love, and a satisfying personal life. Yet, everything transformed following the conclusion of her initial, fervently intense relationship with a man who departed, leaving her in pieces. The divorce stripped her of faith and love, leaving an emptiness that even the greatest achievements could not satisfy. Michael entered her life during a period when Amber had lost all hope for happiness. He possessed great wealth, exuded calmness, and presented her with an experience she had long been deprived of: a vow of security, of steadiness, of a future where she would no longer face her battles in solitude. Amber didn't experience an immediate spark with Michael, yet his presence offered a soothing familiarity, akin to stepping into a well-loved room where everything felt secure and unshakable. Thus, she acquiesced, persuading herself that this serene, unvarying life would suffice to mend the wounds she bore. Yet, Amber had not foreseen the solitude that awaited her. Michael, despite his seemingly flawless exterior, had never truly placed his family at the forefront of his life. He immersed himself in projects, embarked on lengthy business trips, and engaged in countless meetings with clients. The structure he had constructed was not a sanctuary. It was an elaborate theater, where Amber performed the part of the ideal spouse for all to witness. Lonely dinners, superficial exchanges, and evenings spent in a sprawling, quiet bedroom left her feeling less like a companion and more like a decorative object in Michael's meticulously arranged existence. And then Ryan made his entrance. Ryan was Michael's son from a prior marriage, a woman named Amber had never encountered but whose essence lingered in the corners of this home like a silent specter. Michael seldom mentioned his ex-wife or the history they shared, but Amber sensed her influence in every corner, as if the specter of her being still hovered nearby. Ryan stood as the most vivid representation of the history Michael yearned to conceal. He had been raised in an environment rife with discord and uncertainty, a backdrop that colored his perception of the world, imbuing it with a sense of skepticism and emotional distance. Amber remembered the moment she first encountered Ryan. At that time, he was just 18, a recent high school graduate stepping into the world. From the very first glance, the young man with his unruly black hair and intense gaze had instilled a sense of unease within her. It wasn't due to any discourtesy on his part, but rather the way he regarded her, as if she were an outsider, someone who had no rightful place within his family. Years drifted by, and Ryan departed for college, leaving Amber to believe she had finally eluded that penetrating gaze for good. Yet here he was again, no longer merely a young man. Ryan had transformed, not just in his looks but also in his presence. He possessed a subtle, mysterious assurance that left Amber at a loss for words. Yet, that unwavering confidence stirred a sense of unease within her. Her mind wandered to the bracelet she held delicately in her hand. To whom did it belong? Did Ryan acquire it from another place? Or could it be tied to an unfamiliar figure in her life? The questions swirled in her mind, yet above all, the object ignited a disquieting sensation within her, a nagging awareness that perhaps she was oblivious to the true nature of events unfolding in this house. Amber surrendered to the bed, her gaze lingering on the ceiling above. This house resembled a sealed vault, its mysteries gradually emerging, slow and unavoidable. Yet, the most chilling reality lay not in the stories of Michael or Ryan. It dawned on her that the true loss was not of the house, but of her own grasp on reality. Amber found herself unable to shake the memory of Ryan's gaze when he spoke of the bracelet. It lacked the appearance of a boy or a son. It was frigid, assured, and arduous. Her heart swelled with an ever-deepening confusion and unease. She found herself perplexed by the tempest of emotions that Ryan's presence ignited within her, a sensation she had not dared to face since the beginning of her marriage. Yet, regardless of her attempts to dismiss the inquiry, it lingered in her mind, an unyielding specter. As dusk settled, the house was enveloped in a profound stillness once more. Michael had yet to make his return, and, as was customary, he had not bothered to call. Amber lingered in the living room, her gaze glued to the flickering television screen, yet her mind drifted far from the film unfolding before her. The bracelet rested on the table in front of her, a quiet testament to her quest for answers. But from whom? One might wonder. Is that you, Ryan? Or perhaps herself? Gentle footsteps echoed softly behind her. Amber felt no need to glance back. She recognized Ryan's presence instantly. Perhaps the stillness of the house rendered every slight movement magnified, or perhaps Ryan had woven himself so deeply into the dense ambience that his presence was undeniable. He entered the living room, a glass of water in hand, and settled onto the sofa across from her. The soft illumination of the lamp danced across his visage, highlighting the striking contours of the young man he had evolved into. Struggling to find rest. His voice pierced the silence, low and serene, yet laced with an unsettling undertone that stirred her unease. Amber flinched a bit at his abrupt effort to engage her in conversation. He had never taken the first step in a conversation with her before. No, she replied, striving to keep her voice steady. How about you? The hour is late. Why do you not take a moment to rest? Ryan gave a subtle shrug and placed his glass on the table. Perhaps it is this dwelling. The silence is palpable. It stirs a sense of unease within me. Amber found herself in complete agreement. The stillness in this house was anything but serene. The silence hung in the air, thick and charged, as if a tempest were gathering just out of sight. She gazed into Ryan's eyes, seeking an answer, a clue, anything that could illuminate the peculiar unease blossoming within her. Yet his gaze locked onto hers, steadfast and unflinching, devoid of any hesitation or trepidation. That bracelet, Ryan remarked abruptly, his gaze darting to the item resting on the table. You continue to cling to it. Amber sensed her heartbeat decelerate, the pressure building within her chest. She endeavored to uphold an aura of tranquility. It seems that this may be the property of another individual. Are you certain that you have no knowledge of it? Ryan hesitated before responding. He lifted his glass, savoring the moment as he took a deliberate sip, before gently setting it back down. A subtle smirk flickered across his lips, leaving Amber with the unsettling sensation that she had unwittingly wandered into an unseen snare. Would you believe me if I claimed it wasn't mine? His voice carried a gentle quality, yet beneath it lay a hint of challenge that Amber found impossible to overlook. She parted her lips to reply, yet words eluded her grasp. The silence enveloped them, and Amber found herself drawn into Ryan's gaze, a gaze that appeared to command the very essence of the room. She yearned to dissolve the tension, to utter a word, yet before she could gather her thoughts, Ryan rose and approached her. I think, he said, his voice measured, as he leaned down to retrieve the bracelet from the table. He flipped it in his fingers. The tiny object, appearing to bear a significance that belied its diminutive form. Exercise caution in the choices you make regarding what to cling to, Amber. At times, it is the tiniest details that hold the power to transform the entire landscape. His words sliced through the atmosphere, rendering Amber motionless in her chair, her heart racing within her chest. As Ryan turned and strode down the hallway, his silhouette gradually faded from view, yet the resonance of his words lingered in her thoughts. Uncertainty clouded her mind. She couldn't discern whether his words had been directed at the bracelet or if they had alluded to something altogether different. The house slipped once more into silence, yet this time, it was not the oppressive stillness she had come to accept. It held an air of expectancy, as if a new chapter was just unfolding. Amber extended her hand toward the glass of wine resting on the table, lifting it to her lips for a generous sip. Yet, the fiery liquid offered no solace to the disquiet that relentlessly tugged at her insides. For the first time, she found herself questioning whether she was genuinely in command of the situation, or if she had unwittingly become a pawn in Ryan's elaborate game. Amber found herself unable to drift into slumber. The bracelet, Ryan's intense gaze, and the cryptic words he had uttered echoed in her thoughts like an eternal symphony. She sat upright in bed, the pale moonlight seeping through the curtains, creating gentle, ethereal shadows that danced across the room. The discomfort within her grew, as if the very walls of the house concealed mysteries she was not prepared to face. She endeavored to persuade herself that all was well, that Ryan's presence held no danger. Yet, beneath the surface, she sensed a transformation occurring, not solely within him, but within herself too. As Amber made her way down the stairs, she observed that the lights in the living room remained aglow. She halted, halfway down the staircase, her gaze drifting to the sofa where Ryan lingered, a glass of wine cradled in his hand, lost in thought as he stared into the distance. In that instant, he ceased to embody the aloof, indifferent young man she had grown familiar with. He appeared as though he carried the weight of hidden anguish, grappling with a deep-seated conflict she had never witnessed until now. Amber experienced an unusual stirring within her, an emotion that seemed out of place yet intensified with each fleeting moment, a compelling force she could not resist, regardless of her desire to do so. Having trouble finding rest as well? She inquired gently, her voice slicing through the tranquility of the night. Ryan shifted his head to regard her, his eyes gliding over her form as though he were assessing her very essence, pondering the depths of her mind. "How about you?" he responded, his voice measured and purposeful, tinged with a subtle provocation. "Is there something that's preventing you from finding rest?" Amber descended with deliberate grace, inching closer to the sofa, mindful to maintain a calculated space between them. "Perhaps it's the quiet," she remarked, attempting to maintain a nonchalant demeanor, yet her voice revealed the growing unease within her. "This house consistently evokes a sense of isolated." Ryan emitted a dry chuckle, a sound imbued with a complexity she found difficult to unravel. "By oneself. There is no justification for feeling isolated. All that you desire is within your grasp: wealth, prestige, and a seemingly flawless partner by your side. Many would envy the life you lead." Amber's brow furrowed, feeling the sharpness of his words, yet recognizing an uncomfortable reality beneath them. "Do you genuinely believe that all is flawless?" she inquired, locking her eyes with his unwaveringly. "You're completely in the dark, Ryan. This existence, It's not as it appears. Ryan rose, placing his glass gently on the table as he made his way toward her. His demeanor shifted, a weight settling in his gaze as if he were delving deep into her very essence for the truth. Then, please enlighten me, Amber. What is it that brings you such discontent? Could it be Michael? Perhaps it is not. How about you? His questions cut into her, revealing the thoughts and emotions she had desperately attempted to conceal. She averted her gaze, reluctant to engage, yet Ryan was determined not to let her slip away so effortlessly. He advanced, the distance that separated them dwindling to just a breath. Have you ever pondered? He pressed on, his voice lowering to a whisper that sent chills coursing through her. What is it that you truly seek? Amber remained silent. She was unable to. The atmosphere surrounding them was dense, almost oppressive, as if the outside world had faded away, leaving just the two of them ensnared in a tangle of feelings that neither could ignore. Her heart pounded in her chest, breaths coming in rapid, shallow gasps, and when she lifted her gaze, her eyes locked onto his. Fierce, deep, and perilous. Ryan edged closer, his face mere inches from hers. Are you aware of the situation unfolding here? He whispered, his voice a haunting whisper brushing against her ear. We are both aware. Amber stepped back, only to have her foot collide with the edge of the coffee table, bringing her retreat to an abrupt stop. Ryan, she whispered, her voice quivering with emotion. It is not possible for us. I can't, he interrupted, his eyes aflame with intensity. Or perhaps you choose not to. His words resonated within her, a sudden jolt that left her gasping for air. Amber stood at the precipice, teetering on the brink, where a single misstep could send her spiraling into a chaos that would fracture her world. Yet instead of fear, she experienced an unexplainable surge, a tantalizing thrill she had not permitted herself to embrace in years, if ever. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Ryan found himself reaching out, his hand cradling her face with a touch that was both tender and resolute. The heat of his touch coursed through her, dissolving every fragment of reason and inhibition. Amber found herself caught in a moment of uncertainty, unsure of who initiated the movement, but suddenly their lips collided in a kiss. Powerful, unfiltered, and brimming with the fervor of feelings they had long kept hidden. Their surroundings faded into oblivion. All Amber could sense was Ryan, his breath, his proximity, the way he appeared to spark something within her that she hadn't known was absent. Yet, as the kiss drew to a close and their lips separated, an unspoken understanding lingered between them. There was no turning back. They had traversed a boundary that could never be erased. Amber recoiled, her hand instinctively rising to her mouth, as if to wipe away the remnants of the moment that had just unfolded. We shouldn't have done that, she murmured, yet her tone fell short of the certainty she had intended. Ryan remained silent. He fixed his eyes on her, an unyielding stare that conveyed without words that their story was far from finished. Amber turned and walked away, yet the sensation of his gaze lingered, sending shivers cascading down her spine. In that instant, she realized that everything within these walls would be irrevocably altered. Amber dashed from the living room, her breath quickening, her chest tightening as if it might burst. She refrained from glancing back, avoiding the intensity of Ryan's gaze once more. Her legs propelled her toward the bedroom, where the solid wooden door shut with a definitive click. She leaned against it, her hands trembling as they shielded her flushed face. The memory of his lips remained etched on hers, the flavor of their clandestine kiss indelible. The moment she understood she had crossed a line was akin to plummeting into an endless void. She approached the mirror, gazing at the woman who stared back at her. The woman before her was a shadow of the Amber she had once known. Her eyes were shrouded, brimming with a tumult of panic and guilt, yearning for recognition. Yet hidden beneath the layers of those emotions lay something subtle yet unmistakable, a spark of exhilaration, a sensation she was reluctant to acknowledge. Amber shook her head, attempting to cast away the tempest of thoughts swirling within her mind, yet it proved to be in vain. Ryan had etched himself into her mind, and despite her deepest desires to break free, she found herself unable to erase that fleeting moment. As dawn broke, Amber stirred from her slumber, enveloped in a fog of confusion. She cast her gaze toward the window, where the vibrant morning sun streamed through the curtains, causing her to squint slightly. The outside world appeared untouched, as though nothing had transpired. Yet within these walls, all was transformed. As she crossed the threshold of her room, a palpable sensation enveloped her. The atmosphere felt thick, with every footfall resonating forebodingly in the stillness. Ryan had already made his way to the kitchen. Clad in an unadorned t-shirt, he cradled his coffee, his gaze intently locked on his phone. As Amber stepped inside, he glanced up, and their gazes intertwined. Silence enveloped them. The moment lingered, extending beyond its true length, as if time had come to a standstill. Amber's cheeks flushed with warmth, and she swiftly averted her gaze, feigning the act of pouring herself a glass of water to escape the intensity of his stare. "Did you find rest in the embrace of slumber?" Ryan's voice pierced the stillness, steady and deliberate, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Amber tensed, yet she refrained from looking back. "I did," she replied, striving to maintain a steady tone. "How about you?" Ryan took his time before replying. Instead, he stood up, cradling his empty coffee cup as he made his way to the sink. With each step he took, the space between them diminished, and Amber could feel her nerves tightening with every passing second. He halted just behind her, his breath a warm whisper against the nape of her neck, rendering her motionless. "I think," Ryan said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's clear to us that this is just the beginning." Amber whirled, her eyes brimming with a mix of surprise and fear. "Ryan, this was an error, and it shall not occur again." Her voice quivered, yet she endeavored to infuse strength into her words, yearning for it to conceal her apprehension. Ryan fixed his eyes on her, his stare resolute and unyielding. "An error." He resonated with a soft, knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. "If it truly was a mistake, then why didn't you distance yourself from me last night? What held you back from fleeing the instant it began?" Amber found herself at a loss for words. She found herself unable to confront the reality that his words laid bare, a truth she feared to acknowledge. Yet, before she could fully grasp the weight of his words, Ryan retreated, exiting the kitchen in silence. She lingered in place, a sense of disorientation and weight pressing upon her, paralyzed by the moment. On that day, Amber confined herself to her room, striving to immerse herself in work, literature, anything that might occupy the emptiness swirling in her thoughts. Yet, nothing seemed to yield results. Ryan's image lingered in her mind, his eyes piercing through her thoughts, his voice echoing in her ears, the memory of their kiss cycling endlessly in her memory. Amber came to the unsettling realization that her confinement extended beyond the walls of the house. It was a prison of her own making, a labyrinth within her very soul. Several days passed before Michael made his return. The ambience of the home transformed instantly, the disquieting silence yielding to an illusion of normalcy. Michael and Ryan conversed with a natural ease, reminiscent of a father and son reconnecting after a long separation, while Amber struggled to maintain the facade that everything remained the same. Yet, whenever her gaze intertwined with Ryan's, the weight of their unvoiced truth hung palpably in the air, a shared secret they bore in quietude. On the eve of Ryan's departure, Amber lingered by her bedroom window, gazing out at the backyard. The soft radiance of the garden lights cast a gentle glow on Ryan's silhouette, who remained still in the crisp night air, as if anticipating something, or someone. Amber was aware of the consequences, yet her feet seemed to possess a will of their own, guiding her down the stairs, each step intentional, drawing her closer to him. "Amber," Ryan said, his voice unwavering as she paused just a few steps from him. "This cannot be dismissed any longer." Amber remained silent. She lingered in the shadows, the night's chill wrapping around her like a shroud, and in that instant, she grasped the profound truth that her life had shifted beyond recognition. Uncertainty loomed ahead, yet one truth anchored her amidst the chaos. The tale between her and Ryan was far from finished. The journey was merely in its infancy. "You,"